I'm pleased to be speaking once again to the music author who writes excellent books about some amazing artists and bands. Good afternoon, Peter Chexfield.
Good afternoon, Chris.
Yes, it's good to see you. Now, Peter, your latest book is about a band that sold over 100 million records and was second only to the Beatles, the Dave Clark Five. So who were the Dave Clark Five?
Yeah, well, there was a band from Tottenham in North London. Well, it was led by Dave Clark, but the lead singer was a guy named Mike Smith, who also played the keyboards. And they were unique in a way because although they had a guitar, they was dominated by saxophone and organ and drums and heavy drums. So they had a different sound to the Beatles and the Searchers and everyone else.
So how did the Dave Clark Five get together?
That was interesting. They was all into sports, and Dave Clark, he was in a youth club. This was about 1957, so he would have been about 17 or 18, and they just dabbled in music. And literally, they wanted to raise money for I think for some football match. They wanted to travel away, and they put a band together, and that's how they started. Yeah, and then gradually the lineup changed, but Dave Clark led it all the while. And by 1962, it was a lineup that made them famous.
Wow! And what was their first hit?
Their first hit, well, in this country, it only got to number 30, was Do You Love Me, a cover of the Contours song, because their biggest rivals at the time, Brian Paul and the Tremolos, put it out about the same time, and Brian Paul and the Tremolos version took off, got to number 1 or number... And, that got to number 30. But then their really big breakthrough was Glad All Over.
Yes, which we just played at the beginning of the show.
Yeah, it got to number 1. Actually knocked the Beatles, I Want to Hold Your Hand, off the number 1 spot. So.
Wow, there was not many bands that did that in those days, was there? Which, that's really interesting. And they were very, very big abroad, weren't they?
Particularly in America. Part out of good luck, Ed Sullivan, the Ed Sullivan Show in America was the big show. I mean, it really did make stars out of everyone, including the Beatles. But he was in the UK, and he saw the Dave Clark Five. I think it was on Sunday night at the London Palladium, and then he offered him a lot of money. And Dave Clark, he was a shrewd businessman. Even then, he said, "Well, I've never heard of you," and turned him down. And then Ed Sullivan offered more money. He said, "Come on." And then, this was only exactly a month after the Beatles' breakthrough on 8th of March, I believe, 1964. And then they was on a dozen times over the next 3 years on the Ed Sullivan Show. So, and once they started doing that, the Dave Clark Five only ever did one UK tour alongside the Hollies and a few other groups in 1964. But then they concentrated non-stop from 64 to 67 touring the USA. And they really were. They were the second biggest band for a good year or two. Bigger than the Stones and the Kinks and everyone else, yeah.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah.
And it is quite unusual, isn't it, that the leader of the band was a drummer?
Yeah. Yeah, he was the leader. He was the brains behind them, but he was the producer and the businessman. But the lead singer, actually, was a guy named Mike Smith, the late Mike Smith. He died a few years back, unfortunately, who played the keyboards as well. Good-looking bloke. He actually looked like a cross between John Lennon and Paul McCartney in a way. Yeah, but very good-looking guy, but a great voice, very powerful voice.
So when did the band actually split? Well,
they split in 1970. Their final record was Here Comes Summer, the old Jerry Keller song, and that was only a minor hit. Yeah, they decided about a year beforehand. Most of them actually went into 9-to-5 jobs, but Mike Smith and Dave Clark carried on as Dave Clark and Friends for about 3 years after that, but they didn't really have any big hits after that.
And Dave Clark also went on to write a successful musical, Time, which starred at one time Cliff Richard, and then that was followed by David Cassidy. Did he ever write any other musicals?
No, that was a one-off. He spent a long time doing it, apparently, but... And Freddie Mercury sung on the soundtrack, and Freddie Mercury, I must touch on this, was a very close friend of Dave Clark, and Dave Clark and other people have verified this, was on Freddie Mercury's deathbed. He was the last person Freddie Mercury saw alive. He was literally on his deathbed, so they were very close friends, and that was through the musical Time.
Wow, that's amazing. And of course, Time was very successful in America as well, wasn't it?
It was, yes, and there was a spin-off record. It was actually an old Dave Clark 5 song called Because, and Julian Lennon covered it, but it was released in Japan and got to number 1 over there.
And Dave Clark had to stop drumming, didn't he?
Yeah, he had a tobogganing accident about 1972, I believe, and broke several knuckles. Yeah, I do believe, to be honest, he wouldn't have drummed that much. I mean, I couldn't imagine becoming a session drummer or anything like that. So I think he would have, eased back and done other things anyway and got into production more and writing. So, but yeah, that was the reason he stopped.
And we've seen with a lot of 60s bands that they've continued, even not with the same lineup. There may be 1 or 2 of the originals in the band, but that never happened with the Dave Clark 5, did it?
No, apparently some big American promoter in the 80s or 90s got hold of Dave Clark's private phone number and called him up in the early hours and said, Dave, $1 million if you reunite the band. And he said, no, I'm not interested. And then apparently the promoter said, just name your price. And Dave Clark put the phone down.
Did he really?
Yeah.
Wow.
He just wanted it to be remembered, the way they are, and rightly or wrongly, because I think some members, but they didn't struggle financially, but I think they would have welcomed it more. But Dave Clark was the boss, so that's what happens.
And obviously, he probably had the copyright on the band as well, didn't he?
Oh, absolutely, yes, of course.
Yeah. So, what does Dave Clark do now?
Good question. He's a very private man, very enigmatic. He only really surfaces whenever there's a Dave Clark compilation, which is every few years, and does a few interviews, and when the Time musical came out. And at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, they was finally inducted in 2008. And that was a bittersweet moment, where the saxophone player, Dennis Payton, died of cancer about two years before that. But Mike Smith, the lead singer, he was paralysed in an accident about five years beforehand, and he died. But he still insisted, I want to come over to New York for the induction, and he died 11 days before the induction. So it was just the other for a year. So
yeah. So your book is the Dave Clark 5 Bits and Pieces. It's every song from every session from 62 to 73, which is a brilliant book. There's so much information in this. How can our listeners purchase it?
From Amazon, the largest bookshop in the world. Yeah, so you can get it worldwide and all over Thanet. And
if people want to find out more about your other books, your website?
Yeah, just peterchexfield.com, as it sounds. Or just Google my name, Peter Chexfield, you'll easily find it.
And we're about to play another Dave Clark 5 song, Red Balloon. Tell us about that song.
That's an interesting one. It's quite different from all the others. It's actually a cover of a song originally called Calla La Vita, and it's got some French lyrics by Raymond Froggatt, who died fairly recently, I believe. Normally, as I say, Mike Smith was the lead singer, and occasionally Lenny Davison, the guitarist, but they tried it and it didn't come out. And this was the only ever time after over 200 songs, nearly 250 songs, where Dave Clark himself sang lead vocals. And he's not a great singer, but it got to, I think, number 7 or number 8 in the charts, and big all in many other countries around the world. So but Dave Clark himself don't particularly like it. I know on the last, I believe it was the last one, hits compilation, he was asked about it, and he said it's not really my cup of tea, and I haven't included it. So.
Oh, that's a great story. Well, Peter, thank you very much for speaking to us today.
Thank you, Chris.
Here's the Dave Clark 5 and Red Balloon.